to Nova Scotia. I had people come up to me with concerns about living in Nova Scotia and the challenges that people have been facing. And one of the things what people had told me was that living in Nova Scotia is becoming harder and harder to live in. And it's to the point that they had told me that they have to put Nova Scotia behind them because the cost of living, affordable housing, getting access to food banks, public transit, just the everyday stuff in Nova Scotia is just simply out of cost reality for Nova Scotians to go by on their day-to-day basis, which to me is unacceptable, and it's no need for this to ever happen. But this is one of the things that happens when money is the driving force in life. Money been proven over and over again that money is the root cause of all evils and all negativity what we face in the world today. Anyways, so I'm going to bring up a concern, what people brought up to my concern, what they face living here in Nova Scotia. So Tim Houston, Gary Burrow, Stephen McNeil, Premier, if you're watching, affordable housing is one of the issues that majority of Nova Scotians have brought to my attention on social media. They feel that affordable housing is unrealistic, it's just out of reach, and affordable housing is anything but affordable to the people who actually need it. And there's a thing I'm going to mention about this here affordable housing. It's for people who are low income, who have a hard time getting access to affordable housing. Now, did you know, a few years back, there was a Halifax Regional Councillor making well over $80,000 a year. They had access to affordable housing project, which they should not have been. And when they were in that affordable housing project unit, did you know that they were taking space away from somebody who needed that space? And because of that individual, that elected official, council member, living in that affordable housing project where they shouldn't have been in the first place, that took space away from a person who needed affordable housing. And unfortunately, they were forced to live on the street. So affordable housing is one of the issues that majority of Nova Scotians are facing here in our province. I was on the CTV news not that long ago about the pandemic, how homeless shelters were cutting back on the people that were allowed to stay in their Metro Turning Point and other homeless shelters because of the pandemic. And one of the issues that they told the CTV news was that affordable housing is just simply not affordable, and they actually interviewed somebody who'd been working long hours, minimum wage jobs, and after the long hours that they've been working, and they still couldn't afford to pay their rent. So that alone says something to them. When the question was asked to our Premier, Stephen McNeil, what's being done to address affordable housing, how it's not affordable, he had no real answer. His response was, we have something in plan, but it's years off. So that's an indicator that affordable housing, to our Premier, Stephen McNeil, and his Liberal government, that affordable housing is not the top of his agenda. So when you hear that from our Premier, that there's something in place but it's years off, it means it's not the top of his priorities on his agenda. You Nova Scotians at home, obviously, that when Steve McNeil announced his resignation, that he was given credibility to something that he should not have. Here's one right here. Affordable public transit. Not that long ago, Halifax Regional Council, I'll put this right here, made it public that they were going to increase the bus fare to the public transit, Halifax Transit. Majority of the people at the time were struggling to gain access to public transit because of the fares are just simply too much, and it's to the point that they are finding it harder to gain access to the public transit bus, and it's to the point that they're using the public transit a lot less than what they were in the past. And some will either go buy a bike if they had the money to go buy a bike, to walk, or rollerblades. Does people still use rollerblades anymore? Some people had, and some people unfortunately have to walk because affordable public transit is not affordable. I spoke to my Halifax Regional Councillor, David Hinsey. Now here it is. Now this is what he stated. Halifax Regional Council has a project in place, low-income passes for people who need to gain access to the public transit. They can apply for a low-income transit setup. Alright, like it. But here's the problem. If you live with somebody, that person who you're living with, who has no involvement with Halifax Transit, none whatsoever, or yourself, has to show their notice of assessment to the Halifax Regional, Halifax Transit Committee and the Halifax Council. It makes no bloody sense. Why should somebody who needs access to public transit, is applying for their low-income rates to gain access to public transit because they need it, being denied because somebody who they're living with doesn't want to show their notice of assessment? That person who they're living with shouldn't have to show their notice of assessment. If the person who's applying for public transit, all they need to do is show their notice of assessment, make their claim, and get awarded the low-income passes. The reason why they want people who they're living with to show their notice of assessment is so that they don't have to hand out the affordable public transit to the people who actually need it, so they can reduce the numbers who need it, because they know that the people in the Halifax region are having a hard time affording public transit, which is true. And they know that people are struggling to gain access to public transit, and they're using the bus a lot less than what they were in the past. I believe this has to be looked at. I believe the province has to put a law in place that if somebody's in need of public transit, that they should not be denied public transit service, their low-income services, because somebody who they're living with who's not involved in the public transit, who doesn't even use it, should not have to show their notice of assessment to the city. It's inhumane, it's unconstitutional, and it makes no bloody sense. Anyways, another issue that people brought to my attention. Community service, the Department of Community Services. Did you know? People on community services, they have many of employment programs in place to help to get people reemployed who's on the Department of Community Services. Like it, yes, support. But here's the problem. Community services often has people who suffer from mental illnesses, either released from jail or released from a mental hospital, or just too high of a risk to go to work in the first place. The problem with community services is that they put people with mental health issues who can't go to work at risk because their programs force them to go to work. People who have been incarcerated either in jail or in a mental hospital, they have their doctors, they assess their risk assessment. Majority of the time their risk level is enough they can go to the community, but it does not mean that they're mentally safe to go to work. So this here, community services, actually puts people with mental health issues who can't go to work at risk, increase their risk level, and this here has to be looked at. And the other issue with community services, like we talked about affordable housing, they don't give enough money to pay the rent to afford affordable housing in the first place. I mean, affordable housing projects are scarce to come by, and a lot of people who need it are often denied, which is unconstitutional. And let alone, like I said before, with our Premier, Stephen McNeil, how he was not making this the top of his agenda when he should have been. Like how we said, affordable housing was not affordable to the people who need it. Like the Halifax Turning Point was turning more people away than what they do because of the pandemic. Our Premier, when he was interviewed on CTV News, had no bloody answer for these three links: affordable housing, affordable public transit, and community services, because all these links here so far are all connected. Now, access to public transit. Some people who live in the city have access to it quite easily. But there's also people who don't have access to public transit, but yet they need it. Now, did you know? Communities like Porter's Lake, if you live in the community of Porter's Lake, there is a public transit service, but it's a long ways to get access to their park and ride. That's located on Inspiration Way in Porter's Lake, just off exit 20. And there's access to the public transit bus along the number 7 highway and at the Porter's Lake Shopping Plaza if you wish to gain access to it. But it runs on peak hours. But the access to public transit is a concern, and still is a concern, not only to the community of Porter's Lake, but other communities throughout rural Nova Scotia and rural Halifax region. Another concern. Now, Access to food banks. It's good in the city, it is, but like I said, if you live in a rural community like public transit, food banks are often hard to gain access to because of the lack of public transit. Shuttle service is not often there, and some food banks are stricter than others. I asked the food bank out my way in Porter's Lake, and so now is it in Chesapeake. I asked about how their food bank operates. They stated if you're living with somebody, that person who you're living with, similar to the affordable public transit, if you're living with somebody, that person who you're living with has to show their notices of assessment. And if they're making well beyond, then they will deny you services from the food bank. My problem is, if you're living with somebody, they have no affiliation with you, it's not their responsibility to provide you food. The food bank is responsible to provide a person who needs food when they need it. So if the food bank's turning people down because they're living with somebody who's wealthy or whatever, is a poor, it's a topic that needs to work on. Or does the province have to take responsibility from the food banks, make laws that they cannot turn people away who need the food banks, access to the food banks I should say, so people can gain access to it so they're not going without food. Because like I said, it's not somebody else's job to give a person who needs food. It's the person's job who needs food to turn to the resources to get the food, and the resources can't be turning the people who need the services down when they need it. That's a concern. Now, there's one right here, famous one. You all seen this many times. Issues with the courts. I'll put this right at the top of the agenda, right at the top. The courts. Why is it a concern? How many times do you see people in court with mental health illnesses, and you'll see Crown prosecution direct this person who became conflict of the law because of their mental disorder in the wrong direction? Majority of the time, you'll see Crown prosecution direct the accused either in the courts through the criminal justice system, through the correctional faculty in Burnside or anywhere in Nova Scotia, to the jails, rather than a mental hospital, which is another concern. I believe our Minister of Justice and our Premier, Stephen McNeil, our future Premier, Tim Houston, if you're watching, this has to be looked at. If the courts are going to deny a person who needs the services, mental health services, for the services they need, we have to hold Crown prosecution responsible. We have to get more active on this. It's either you send people in the right direction, or we got to change our courts around completely. Because part of the problem is when people become conflict of the law with mental health issues, the majority of the time they're low income and they have to rely on Nova Scotia legal aid, who's often underfunded and cannot represent the accused who come in conflict with the courts, the law, properly to the point that gets steered in the wrong direction. If you steer somebody with mental health in jail, they're not getting help what they need, they're coming out, the risk level is 100 times higher than it ever been, and it puts more people at risk because our Nova Scotia justice system, our Crown prosecution service, failed somebody within the courts for going the right direction where they needed to go to, and we, the people, have to bring that to an end, and you elected officials, Gary Burrell, Tim Houston, Steve McNeil, and what's his name, Mark Fury, have to get on this issue. Now, here's one right here. East Coast Mental Health East Coast Forensic Psychiatric Hospital. I'll put this right to the top, right next to the courts, because I'm going to tell you right now, if any of you had ever been inside the East Coast Forensic Hospital, just touring it or visiting, or even as a patient, one thing what you'll notice is their services mean well, it does. But the hospital is too small to house the people who need the services when they're in there. Majority of the people, when they go through the courts to getting access to East Coast Forensic Hospital, hopefully try to get the NCR verdict that means not criminally responsible. When they go in East Coast Forensic Hospital, they're in there to gain access to the service what they need. But if this hospital, East Coast Forensic Hospital, is over accommodated with patients, with majority of the time what they are, the person who needs the services from the East Coast Forensic Hospital is sent back to the courts. They'll find them criminally responsible, and the prosecution will send them off to jail. They'll finish their time off there, which is a concern. So, if the East Coast Forensic Hospital is not being invested in, no tax dollars, no no federal funding, none whatsoever, to expand this hospital, what's the point of having this hospital if it can't help the people who need it? My suggestion is, instead of sending people to the QE2, have a nurse on duty 24/7 for calls when the police have to arrest somebody and they have to have somebody mentally assessed. That should be looked at, expanding the hospital, and there should be an expansion within the East Coast Forensic Hospital because they have lots of property to do it. If you expand the East Coast Forensic Hospital, it's going to reduce the risk of the number of people who are going to jail, who shouldn't be in jail, so the courts can do their job properly. So if you're going to just go after, so if you're going to crack down at the courts, the Crown prosecution for sending people in the wrong direction, you also have to crack down on our elected officials who's not making our hospital, East Coast Forensic Hospital, big enough to house, to accommodate the people who need it. Because the last thing what we want at home is a patient being denied service, sent to jail, come back out in the community that's 100 times angrier, and they hurt people out in the community because our courts failed to direct that person in the direction they rightfully need to go, to the East Coast Forensic Hospital. And that happens quite a bit. Now, mental health court. Mental health court is similar to the East Coast Forensic Hospital. You go for your verdict, but except you don't have to go for a 30-day psychiatric evaluation and all this craziness. What you go through into the mental health court, you're often assessed by the team at the Dartmouth Wellness Court people, and they come to, if your charge is related to your illness, they will accept you if they have room for you. It's similar to the East Coast Forensic Hospital, but the services doesn't always work, which is a concern, and sometimes you enter the East Coast Forensic Hospital or the mental health court, sometimes it can increase your risk level and make you angrier when you're in it than before you went into it in the first place, which is another concern. When you look at the mental health court in East Coast Forensic Hospital, affordable housing often comes into play because these people who cannot leave the East Coast Forensic Hospital because affordable housing is not accessible to them. Because if they go out in the community, they can't afford affordable housing. It's better to leave them in the East Coast Forensic Hospital, live there, than out in the community, out on the street, getting sick again. Because, like I said, our premier does not have affordable housing on the top of his agenda, like he obviously proved it. Because when you look at the mental health court, the East Coast Forensic Hospital, affordable housing, affordable public transit service, community services, the courts, food banks, and access to public transit, all this is connected in a chain of command. It's like a chain going down, leading to something. It's all connected, and all these issues has to work for people to be successful, which is not, that's another concern. So that's with that. One person came to me and told me Nova Scotia feels like a third world country. I have to agree with them on that. I'll put that right over here so you can see it. So all you failed politicians and all you future people want to become politicians, so you can see what's going on here. When they say Nova Scotia feels like a third world country, some people told me, because community services, it's not there to help the people who really need it, like mentally ill. They rather deny you services. Community services would rather put you on a job site and increase your risk level after when a doctor had stated that you cannot go to work because your work environment is not right not a good fit for people. And like I said, just because you can be released from the East Coast Forensic Hospital or mental health court does not mean that you are capable of going to work. Does not mean that, none whatsoever. That's a whole nother bucket of worms. And the other thing that people brought to my attention was this here. Wait time for surgery is just simply too long, which I agree. But did you know? I looked into this. If your surgery is serious, if it's life-threatening, if it's something that's going to stop your day-to-day functioning, they will speed up your wait time for your surgery sooner than later if it's serious enough. But this here has become a thing in the past. We can't have people being discouraged when your doctor got to send a referral for surgery. That needs to be done. That really needs to be looked at. Now, Nova Scotia's health care. When I talked about East Coast Forensic Hospital, mental health court, Nova Scotia being a third world country, the wait time for a surgery, the courts, community services. This is all connected to Nova Scotia health care because we know it's a failing service. And obviously when the pandemic started here in, early April, or mid-April, I should say. A year before, Steve McNeil made all kinds of cuts to Nova Scotia's health care. Then the pandemic came. Now he's running around. He cut the head off the chicken pretty much to their healthcare system. So now the services what we Nova Scotians need are no longer available. To get access to a nurse to get tested for the COVID-19 was an issue. Like I said, surgery times was an issue. It's a concern, and at the end of the day, the cuts that Steve McNeil made to our Nova Scotia healthcare system all came back and bit them in the rear end. And that's another indicator why I do not believe Steve McNeil should be appreciated as the premier, how his liberal buddies made him to be. And when I seen Tim Houston say a good little thing about Steve McNeil, including that Gary Burrow, I actually felt let down by them. How in the hell can you give somebody credibility when he made cuts to our healthcare system? No, he didn't. Affordable housing, he couldn't even address it. All of this is all connected. It's not top of his priority. But yet you, Tim Houston, and you, Gary Burrell, are going to stand around and give Steve McNeil credibility for not considering any of this the top of his agenda. All of this has to connect for mentally ill issues and for problems to go away, which is not going to happen. Now, here's a famous one that's brought to my attention. Psychiatrists should be part of the Nova Scotia free healthcare system. How is somebody out in the community mentally ill going to get tested if they have a mental illness if your psychiatrists are not paid for? It should be free. Because I say, all right, we'll pay to have a psychologist, but a psychiatrist is the actual doctor that mentally ill people need to see, or if somebody's being tested for mental illnesses, they have to gain access to a psychiatrist. It's a psychiatrist that types up the medication if they feel that you may need some. But a lot of people stated that a psychiatrist should be part of the free part of Nova Scotia's health care, because mental health is a huge topic in Nova Scotia. Still is, and most likely always will be. There's another one that people brought to my attention. Politicians should be only allowed to serve a 2 4-year term. I agree with this. I believe in the American politics. I agree with that because, like I said, you see people who become annoyed can't come acceptance when they lose in elections. That's because they've been in office too long. A 2-year term should be all you should be allowed to serve in any level of government. Let's say a political person serves in municipal politics. They should only be allowed to serve a 2 4-year term only at that level. If they want to run again, you can run federally or provincially, but at the municipal level, they should be disqualified after when they already served a 2 4-year term. But I think that's the best way to go because you have to respect democracy. Nova Scotia just simply has too many people that have been running far too long to get nothing to show for, and because of that, Nova Scotia's economy has been suffering because our political people, they get so used to the job what they're doing, they actually lose focus on what they're doing and forget about the purpose of them being elected in the first place and who elects them. And here's an issue that people brought to my attention, which I actually agree with. The Nova Scotia Utility Review Board. The reason why somebody brought that to my attention, because they felt that if Nova Scotia Power or if anything political has to be done, they often not do what's in favor of the people, but often what's in favor of investors, government, corporations, like Nova Scotia Power. If they want an increase, they'll go through the review board, and the review board will give it to them anyways. Like the situation here in Lake Echo, and just on the border of Porter's Lake and Lake Echo, the Utility Review Board approved a contractor who's going to put a recycling/dump, into a community that's going to impact the water qualities in that community to the point when that person goes to sell their land to hopefully find a better piece of property to live on, to dealing with this garbage, this landfill, that they will lose their property value to the point when they sell their property, they won't get the property value to their land that they own, and therefore they're living in an unsafe, healthy community. Like the Northern Canoe Club in Lake Echo is very vibrant. That's at risk because of this landfill/recycling depot, whatever you want to call it. But the Utility Review Board went in favor of the contractor, who's a problematic person, Lawrence Fountain, who's known for bullying people with his lawyers to get access to what he wants. Our elected council member, David Hensby, supported this here to happen. And because of that, now people's livelihoods is at risk, and we, the people, have to take more charge of taking control of the people who we elect in our province. Perhaps the Nova Scotia government could look at making changes to Utility Review Board, or just dissolve it altogether. But obviously, the Nova Scotia Utility Review Board definitely needs to be worked on. Alrighty, here's our second part. We're almost done. These are issues that people brought to my attention. First one will deal with this here. Mental health. Employment. Employers are not. Mental health. Employment. Employers are not too often not going to hire them because they are too scared, but only do because government is paying them money to have them employed in the first place. Very true. I don't know how many people, this issue been going on since the days of the dinosaurs, pretty much. Something like the community services to try to, the Department of Community Services will try to sign somebody employment, and the only reason why that they'll hire them is because the province is paying them money to hire them in the first place. Other than that, they won't keep them employed. Usually that's through volunteer. I actually seen this done, which is actually appalling. It needs to be looked at. I seen somebody from the East Coast Forensic Hospital find work. They're trying to change their lives. No criminal record. But for the simple fact that that individual was connected, associated with the East Coast Forensic Hospital, the employer was unsure if they should hire them or not because they don't know what the risk level is. And the whole point of being in the East Coast Forensic Hospital and getting help to the services what you need is so you can change your lives for the better. And when you have this issue right here, employers are too scared to hire them because they're affiliated with the East Coast Forensic Hospital or any kind of mental health program is a concern. And not only that, when you see employers that are only going to hire somebody because the government is paying them is another concern. Nova Scotia government has to crack down on that problem. A hefty fine, a charge in the direction of the employer, which we, how do you go by that, which is a reasonable question to ask. But I believe that issue has to be looked at because the days of looking down on people because they have a mental health issue is out with the wind a long time ago, and that has to be looked at. And here is another one I'm going to bring up to your attention right here. Employment in Nova Scotia. Part-time workers are often working as full-time. Often employers lay off, fire people to avoid paying benefits that people need to work more. People are just simply working too hard. Part-time, people working part-time who often were working full-time, yet the employers want to keep them part-time is a concern. That is because they don't have to pay benefits. The Nova Scotia government has to crack down on this here issue. I'll put this right over because they're very well connected. Now, if this is worked on, this also has to be worked on. When people want to work part-time, they should only be receiving part-time hours. If the employer wants to work them full-time, then by law they should be forced to hire them full-time, or you only give them the part-time as labeled as when you put your job posting up. But when you see companies that will hire people part-time but work them full-time, the government has to act on that fast. Because, like I said, people are trying to make ends meet. Like I said before, people from mental health hospitals are allowed to work so many hours because full-time hours can put their health and well-being at risk and the general public at risk. And that's something that we would like to avoid. And we also would like to see people that's affiliated with mental health issues to succeed out in the community and not fail. And because when you see people, employers will hire people part-time or will fire them just so they can avoid paying benefits is another issue that has to be looked at. Because like I said, we want people to succeed in our province and not fail. And like with mental health, this is all connected to success. There's another one right here. Please label people with mental health issues rather than help them out. Harassment. And that's exactly what it is. I had people come up to me when the police are actually trying to help them out. The police are actually making things worse for them. I've seen a police officer one time, we're going to charge this person. Not that we want to, but we're going to charge you because that's the only way that we can get you help. If there's somebody out in the community just because they have mental health issues, if they're having a bad day or because they're an argument with somebody does not mean they're having a mental health issues, but it does mean they're having a bad day. It's a very close, touchy topic when you see somebody with mental health issues in an argument. Are they in an argument because they're just fed up, or is it because they're having a bad day, and are they a threat at all? Sometimes they're not. I've seen people come up to me telling me that police have been making their situations worse rather than helping. They'll see them, like I said, in an argument or having a bad day, and they'll assume that they're having mental health issues when they're not. Police have to be held accountable for this. We can't have people being scared to go to the police when they need services. And people should not have to turn to the police to get services because our courts and our mental health care system is often turning them away from the services that they rightfully need. So in a way, like I said before, it's all connected in a cycle. And that's something what our political government and officials has to work on. All this. Here's a famous one which you didn't know. This is the final one right here. Cannabis, weed, marijuana. Marijuana in mental health hospitals, the East Coast Forensic Hospital. The mental health court program for medication treatment should not have the courts look down on people because it's their need of it. I agree with this 100%. I believe the days of looking down on people in the negative eye because they're using weed is out with the wind a long time ago. Marijuana is actually a medication that they need. It's been proven what they need. And I'm going to say is that is outdated. It needs to change. I mean, if somebody's smoking weed because that's what they do to relax, that's something that should be alright used for. I had a mental health clinician telling me this, Nicole. I'm going to keep your name, your full name, secret so you can hide, like the coward that you are. I'm going to hide you. Now get this. Nicole told me this. Smoking weed is a lot like drinking liquor from the liquor store. They don't want you because it increases your risk level. Smoking weed, Nicole, if you're watching, if you have any kind of mental health training, any whatsoever, and even if you got a mind setting of an ant, marijuana is a medication that reduces a person's problems and increases it. It's been proven it many times. Nova Scotia, the Canadian federal government, and the American federal government got many scientists that did tests on this many times. And it's been proven. Marijuana does more help than it does bad. And the courts has to stop getting after people, stop disciplining people, stop harassing people who need this marijuana that treat their mental illnesses. Because if it works, why go against the grain when it's easier to go with it, and especially if it's working for people. So I gotta say, our Nova Scotia government has to stop the courts and our mental hospitals denying marijuana from the people who are in need of it, and make it accessible to them in the mental health facilities where they're at when they need it. I mean, I don't know why you have to be a trained, top-of-the-line clinician to hand out marijuana. I mean, if a person with mental health is not going to get so high to the point they're bouncing off the walls and all this type, they're going crazy, it actually calms them down. A person without mental health that engages marijuana to get right high, they're bouncing off the walls. Somebody with mental health issues, they can't get high. It's incapable for them to get high unless they're smoking. I was inhaling paint or any drug paraphernalia, whatever you want to call it. But other than that, marijuana cannot get a person mentally ill, mental health issues high. It's impossible. Medically impossible. So the days of looking down on people in the mental health court and in our court system and in the East Coast Forensic Hospital are long gone, and our government has to act on it. But anyways, these are the topics that I brought up and the political names of my opinion on them. You've seen it earlier in this video, and I ask that you act on it. And if there's anybody else that'd like to subscribe to my videos, feel free to do so. Click on the bottom part of the screen here on your computer. But anyways, my name's Adam Conrod, and we'll see you later on.